Good evening. Welcome to Behind the Headlines. Tonight is Wednesday, the 26th of January. I'm Regan King, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host Simon Barrett. This evening, we're dedicating this program to those precious Jewish lives that were lost, that were murdered on an industrial scale by the Nazis in what is called the Holocaust, or in Hebrew, the Shoah, the catastrophe. Over the course of a few years, over 6 million Jewish lives were taken by the Nazis, who desired the total elimination of the Jews, not only from Germany, Simon, but from across Europe. And we are going to be commemorating Holocaust Memorial Day tomorrow. In 2005, the United Nations set aside the 27th of January, which was the day at which Auschwitz, the camp at Auschwitz, was liberated. And they marked this as a day where the Holocaust is remembered, where it's commemorated, and where together people who stand in solidarity with the Jewish people say, never again.
Absolutely. I mean, it's extraordinary to think that tomorrow will be the 77th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, which is also International Holocaust Memorial Day. And, it's extraordinary to think that so many years have passed by then. But at the same time, we're actually seeing that Holocaust education has never been so widespread, particularly in the West. You know, we can count how many movies, Hollywood movies made about the Holocaust or the Shoah, books written about it. We've seen documentaries made about it, TV series made about it, newspaper articles about it, TV news reports about it, social media postings about it. I mean, it's like, I don't think there's anyone near enough on the planet, certainly in the Western world, who doesn't know that the Holocaust didn't happen. But the danger is that we're seeing instances of Jew hatred on the same levels as in the 1930s and 40s that brought in Nazi and fascism, both in Germany and also in Italy and also in Spain as well. So it seems a kind of paradox. On the one hand, Holocaust education has never been greater in terms of awareness of it, but at the same time, we're seeing that levels of anti-Semitism are record highs. Oh,
and attached to that anti-Semitism, there's also misinformation about the Holocaust. There's conspiracy theories. There's even Holocaust deniers that are out there that actually perpetrate attacks against Jews and come up with all of these wild ideas, acting as though this was a made-up event. Now, the word Holocaust did not originate with what we refer to as the Holocaust today. It was a word that comes from ancient Greek, and it actually means burnt offering. Even before the Second World War, the word was sometimes used to describe death of large groups of people, but since 1945, this is the word that is recognized across the world, specifically relating to the massacre of Jews across Europe. And the Jews, as I said, are referred to as the Shoah, which means catastrophe. It was a concerted attempt to wipe out the Jews. Now, in 1933, I believe, when the Nazis came into power in Germany, from that moment there was a campaign of propaganda. There was a campaign of lies against the Jews. There was increasing year by year levels of persecution against them. Slowly but steadily preparing the German populace and others and versing them in the terminologies of Jew hatred, preparing society for such an event. Really also trying to drive out the Jews as well, forcing immigration. But many were resolved to stay and to stick it out, maybe hoping for better times with other elections, something like that. But that remember, had generations there. Also, Jew hatred is nothing new. This is something that tragically is seen all throughout Europe. Even, lest we think that the yellow star worn by the Jews forced by Hitler in the Holocaust was something that originated with the Nazis. Jews in this country, in this nation, were forced in the medieval ages at various stages to wear the yellow star or some other symbol of their Jewishness, so that people could insult or abuse or similarly discriminate.
Absolutely. Even Martin Luther, the famous theologian, wrote a book in German, "The Jews and Their Lies."
Yeah. It was paraded at Nuremberg at the rallies. Hitler and the Nazis used that book as a historic, wonderful German piece of literature against the Jews.
Absolutely, which was theologically used to justify the anti-Semitic pogroms that Hitler carried out. Of course, we got the book Mein Kampf that Hitler wrote as well when he was in prison in the early 1930s, which became his blueprint for the Holocaust. This year's theme, which is tomorrow, we have to remember the International Holocaust Memorial Day is tomorrow. So the theme is for International Holocaust Day is one day in history to look back at a particular date that occurred in the Holocaust, such as the 19th of April 1943, when a Jewish resistance fought back against the Nazis in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising against all odds. Just to remind you, we are live, we are interactive tonight, so I'd love to know your views and your comments, and we've got quite a long question. It is 70 years on from the liberation of Auschwitz, Birkenau. What are the lessons we need to learn from the horrors of the Holocaust? So I'd love to know your views and your opinions. Also, I think in this program as well, we'll also discuss last week was the 80th anniversary of the Wannsee Conference, in which Hitler and his ministers planned the final solution. And also there's a raging debate as well, is that could the Allied forces intervened and bombed Auschwitz, Birkenau and other Nazi death camps that would have saved thousands and thousands of Jewish lives before the end of the Second World War? So some very big moral questions I think we need to ask.
There are very few survivors of the Holocaust today. And I think, Simon, that this is a challenge. I know that, for all of the reasons of keeping people alive, keeping the story going, Israel was very, very concerned with regard to the COVID-19 pandemic that they protect their Holocaust survivors. Hence, some extreme and very strict regulations there to try to let's keep these guys alive because they need to continue telling their story. Despite the story having been told, you're exactly right. There seems to be, despite all of the past generations of education, an increase in Jew hatred on comparable levels to what there was prior to the Second World War. And let's not act like things were times better in the United States or in the UK in their treatment of the Jews in those days either. I mean, you can look at that there were very real and large groups of fascists and anti-Jew people in and across the US and in the UK. You can consider the KKK, which was very active in those days, would specifically target Jews as well as African Americans. And so it's not something that we can look at and say, okay, we're without any blood guilt. There are lessons that we can learn, and we need to be asking, what are those lessons 77 years on? There are too few survivors alive to give first-hand accounts of the horrors of the Holocaust, although we actually do have an interview that Simon has conducted, I believe, today with Susan Pollock, MBE, who is a Holocaust survivor. And it is an immense privilege to be able to have this interview with Susan on this program. And I pray that this will be a blessing to each of you.
To mark International Holocaust Memorial Day, it's a great privilege that we're joined by Susan Pollock, MBE. Not only is she a friend of Revelation TV, she went on Revelation TV's tour of Israel back in 2019. I've had the privilege of interviewing Susan for the Middle East Report, and also she's spoken up against Jeremy Corbyn for his failure to tackle anti-Semitism and his anti-Israel sentiment within the Labour Party. She's also gone to Brussels and addressed the European Commission and leaders of the European Parliament, telling them that they're not doing enough to combat Jew hatred and not doing enough to stand with Israel in the European Parliament. So it's our special guest today to welcome Susan Pollock, MBE. Susan, I consider you a friend. You are a very special and very remarkable woman. I also forgot to mention the fact that you even addressed the Chelsea women's football team on the eve of their Champions League semi-final. So we thank you for all that you do in terms of Holocaust education. But Susan, can you just share very briefly with us, because we don't have the time, to share your experiences of what you went through with the Holocaust?
Well, I was born in Hungary. That's where I spent my early childhood, and from memory, I had a happy childhood with my family. There were two children. My brother and myself. He was 2 years older, and we were faithful. We kept Shabbat as a holy day, and it was very important. However, I must admit, girls weren't given that much information, on Shabbat. But times were moving on rapidly, and with that, unfortunately, anti-Semitism raised its ugly head in Hungary. We have to remember that this violent attitudes and they had no resonance in our minds. We could not imagine what was happening elsewhere in Germany. And in 1942, of course, there was a Wannsee conference, but we could see the rise of anti-Semitism because we were deprived of our livelihood. We had to close down our little business. And later on, my education came to a stop in Hungary. And that unfortunately caused us enormous problems because no other school would accept us to further education. So we experienced very difficult times.
And Susan, just to give our viewers a bit of a backdrop. So you were born in Hungary in 1930.
That's
we
right.
see that when Hitler invaded Poland on the 2nd of September 1939,
Yes.
Hungary became part of the Axis powers, where we started to see like the Nuremberg laws introduced in Hungary, with a very fascist dictatorship in power in Hungary. But how did your life change really with the onset of the Nazi invasion of Hungary that occurred in 1944?
Well, in my experience, certainly I'm from a village, a small little village. We had not seen any of the German occupation, any evidence of it. And however, the word in a derogatory sense, Jew, was raised constantly, and the rapid rise of accusations. We're Jewish. What did we do? We were integrated. We supported Hungary. We kept our faith. Yes, we're Jewish, but it didn't matter. And it's like a poison. It's just like a poison that had its potential, and many things happened to us, such as having left the school in this little village. Our little business had been closed down. We had no income, nothing to support us, and the only source of income that became possible just about. My late father's business was shut, as I said. He had to carry heavy loads on his back. So everything was difficult, became very, very difficult. My brother loved going to football matches. He got beaten up outside by the thugs. Get out, Jews. And of course, we had to wear the yellow star, sort of recognition, keep away, and such things.
And Susan, what happened to your father? Because it's really absolutely tragic what happened to your father.
My father, unfortunately, had experienced almost an impossible situation. And when he went to complain or just plead with the council, he was refused. So they had called him up together with the 16 other approximately Jewish men. And they said, well, this is not the place for you anymore. And they had a wagon. They ordered him on that wagon and they took him away. My mom and my brother and myself were allowed to go say goodbye to him. But we had no idea. What was it about? Where is he going to go? We couldn't travel anymore on the trains. So we sent a local lady and she said he was unrecognizable.
Horrible.
Unrecognizable.
And Susan, your family, your mother, including your brother, was sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Can you share with us what that journey was like on the train, and what did you see when you actually arrived at the Nazi death camp?
Well, yes, we were sent after having been into ghettos in Hungary. We were actually ordered to get on the wagon, on the train. And I took my sewing machine, little girl, carrying a heavy Singer sewing machine, thinking maybe I could support my family with my work. We arrived and there were only mothers and many, many children in that wagon. And the terror hit us immediately. Get out in German. Well, we were stunned. Where are we? What's happening? Somebody came, spoke Hungarian, and said, "Don't say that you're younger than 15 years old." No time to explain. So when the German came, the German officer, "How old are you?" Me. I said, "I'm 15. Ich bin 15 Jahre, 15 years old." And that was a cutoff age. Below that, straight into the gas chamber, as my mother has been sent to.
Absolutely horrific, Susan. You also then were moved to the kind of labor camp in Germany, where you also then ended up finding yourselves at the end of the war in Bergen-Belsen in Germany.
Yes.
Can you describe the conditions that you were in and how that you were actually liberated by a British soldier?
Yes. Well, during the winter months, we had been sent on a death march. I had a period where I was allowed to work. They showed me what to do. But then winter came, 44, 45 winter, and we started walking in freezing, no adequate clothes, nothing like that. We walked and walked for weeks. Many of us got shot along the way. And we walked into Bergen-Belsen. We didn't know what it means, Bergen-Belsen, a place of death. Most of the people, bodies were rotting there. We were placed in a barrack. And and I was unable to express anything in my mind. I thought, this is a nightmare. What is it? But I met someone. I had to crawl out. Actually, I couldn't live with that condition. I crawled out to the next barrack, and my next door neighbor, Mrs. Schwartz, recognized me. And she said, "Are we going to survive?" Well, I said to her, just hang on a bit longer. It's the first time I was speaking Hungarian in Bergen-Belsen. And she was, and she was kind of hopeful. I crawled back, following day I crawled back to her. She was dead. Lice all over. We could see, I could see. So I crawled out again. I crawled out in the on the field within the camp. And I feel some gentle hands picking me up. I couldn't believe it, and placing me in a waiting small little ambulance. And that was my rescue. A British soldier picked me up and had the kindness and the goodness to take time off from their long battle fight until they got to us. And yet, I mean, it was just a reawakening.
Susan, I just want to thank you very much for sharing your very, very powerful story of survival,
Yes.
but also your victory over Nazism. What are your thoughts today as we mark the 77th anniversary since the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, but also International Holocaust Memorial Day?
Well, it isn't just my story that's important, important to tell, and it is important to tell. But I think it is. We should also concentrate on anti-Semitism today, and we should also remind everyone that we alone. There's only less than 1% of Jews living in the globe. We need each other. We depend on everyone else, and only then, changes perhaps will take place, and that's important.
And Susan, how important is it that well, the International Holocaust Memorial, the International Holocaust Memorial Alliance, keep the memory of the Shoah alive for future generations? Because it's so important, particularly when we see this massive rise of Jew hatred on the internet and on social media. I mean, it's saying that in 2021, for the first 6 months, went up 50% from the previous year. How important is it that governments and society get to grips with what is Jew hatred?
It's most important, because hate and discrimination and violent actions and whatever accompanies that anti-Semitism and denial is disfiguring the history, and it is unfortunately it grows unless it is stopped in its roots. It can grow and destroy all of us, not just the Jews, but eventually many other people. We've got to stop it at the root, and by whatever means is possible.
And Susan, I mean, you are to be commended, not only for telling us all about your harrowing story, the work that you've done in terms of Holocaust education, speaking at schools and speaking to even Chelsea football team, and also standing up against Jew hatred by calling Jeremy Corbyn out, the former leader of the Labour Party, for calling out the European Commission and European parliamentarians for not doing enough. As Christians, what can we do to stand with you and the Jewish people in Israel in this fight that we share together against Jew hatred?
I think one important, very important thing one can do to show that togetherness and preach the truth, and preach that love for each other and helpfulness and kindness towards the Jews in a large group, in the churches, and wherever people, and they're decent people, but they may not realize how quickly hate spreads. So I think we're only a small number. We absolutely depend on you and everyone else.
Susan, I just want to thank you for you. You're an inspiration to us all. You are in your 90s and you're going strong. So please continue to speak up against Jew hatred. Please continue to tell your difficult story. And we want to thank you for the difference that you made for Israel and the Jewish people, but also how you've reached out to the Christian community. It's been absolutely fabulous. And it's a pleasure knowing you. And stay safe.
I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your goodness and kindness and what you have done. And go a long way and be well. And together we'll perhaps achieve our purpose.
Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us on Behind the Headlines.
What a beautiful account there from Susan Pollock in BE. Thank you so much for that blessing of an interview, Simon. We do have some emails and texts that have come in. Please keep them coming. This is from Les. He says, "Hi Simon and Regan. In case you're interested, I noticed there's a TV program on BBC4 tonight at 10 p.m. I'll be on a train at that time, but can maybe watch on catch up, called Final Account Storyville, about the last living generation of everyday people to participate in the Third Reich. It contains upsetting scenes and doesn't mention any more details." That sounds interesting. Les, the Jewish people, he goes on to say, have been subjected to persecution since they became a nation of people called Israel thousands of years ago, and it has not stopped. Satan's futile attempts to destroy them shall not succeed because God has a future for them revealed in the Bible. Amen. I know a man, Hugh says, who believes the Holocaust didn't happen. He believes the Jews are taking over the world. When I tried to show the evidence it did happen, it's almost as if he's blind to the truth. This is a spiritual battle. Here, you can take a page from my my dear wife's book. She's Jewish background, and whenever someone said, Jews, that there was a guy near us actually who said something about Jews taking over the world, and my wife responded, absolutely. Jesus, he's a Jew who's taking over the world. So there we go.
Absolutely, and the other thing is when you see the video footage, when you see the testimonials of those who actually survived the Shoah and go in such great detail, it is the most offensive thing I think you can possibly say to anyone, to actually believe in Holocaust denial. In some countries, it's a crime, and it should be, because it goes against reality of what actually happened. Well,
I mean, this is something that is tragically very, very common, and Anita also touches on this problem. She says, "Good evening, Simon and Regan. It's always lovely to see you both. Such an important event to remember. I don't think anyone who has seen the pictures of those who survived and the bodies of some of the victims could ever forget them." And I know you've been to Yad Vashem and have seen, as I have, the display there.
I've also been to Bergen-Belsen in Germany as well.
Oh, wow.
So actually to see the gravestone of Anne Frank as well is very horrific and horrifying. And the thing is, the interesting thing about Bergen-Belsen was it's right next door to the British Army base, military army base. But that was where the Nazi officers would have based themselves. And then literally it's only like 2-3 miles away from the former Nazi officer base in Germany.
Amazing. Anita says that We had a German student who stayed with us who refused to believe that the Holocaust took place. He was resentful that his country were still paying reparation payments. God clearly wanted him to see the truth, though, as there were so many TV dramas and documentaries on the Holocaust during his stay, escape from Sobibor, etc. Auschwitz was, as we know, one of the worst camps in terms of death. I believe around 1.1 million Jews lost their lives in this dreadful place. We should be teaching children about this and actively counteracting any Jew hatred today. Genesis 12, verse 3, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Thank you for that. Anita, and I'm curious, did that German student, did he actually change his mind? Did he acknowledge and admit, yep, this happened, and own up to it? Please write in and let us know.
Yeah, on a kind of more positive note, I mean, I've had the privilege of interviewing probably over 12 survivors of the Shoah for Revelation TV, and it's been one of the greatest privileges that I've been able to do in broadcasting, is for them to tell their story. But there is one remarkable characteristic, and Susan has it in abundance, that these Holocaust survivors who have been through literally a living hell and survived the death camps, they have a certain characteristic, and that is an absolute passion and love for life. There is no hatred in their hearts towards the Germans or towards the Nazis, and just this passion to enjoy life, and we could learn something from them. Going on, I think we need to touch on something else, because last Thursday, the 20th of January, last week marked the 80th anniversary of the Wannsee Conference, in which the Nazis planned the final solution. So we now have a video to go to, thanks to ICEJ UK, and this is Dr. Jürgen Berglers talking about the final solution.
We are here at Villa Wannsee, just outside of Berlin, in a picturesque place. We are here at Villa Wannsee, just outside of Berlin, in a picturesque place just beside Lake Wannsee. Yet it was the place where, led by Reinhard Heydrich, 15 leading Nazi bureaucrats were gathering to plan the final solution, the murder of 11 million Jews that were living in Europe at that time. This poses the question, what led them to a point that 15 highly educated people, half of them had a PhD degree, some were sons of pastors, theologians, came to a point to plan the murder of 11 million Jews in Europe. In order to understand that, let's take a step back in German history.
In 1933, with a population of 60 million, almost all Germans belonged to either the Roman Catholic or the Protestant churches. The Jewish community in Germany was less than 1% of the total population. The anti-Jewish Nazi ideology strongly enforced the anti-Semitism that was historically widespread throughout Europe and had deep roots in Christian history. The largest Protestant church in Germany in the 1930s was the German Lutheran Church, with a theologically grounded tradition of loyalty to the state. A movement emerged within this denomination called the German Christians. The German Christians embraced the nationalistic and racial aspects of Nazi ideology. Once the Nazis came to power, this group supported a Nazified version of Christianity and were zealous supporters of Adolf Hitler.
One of the reasons why the Christian church in Germany would not stand up in full force against Adolf Hitler was the long-standing history of Christian anti-Semitism that is dating back even to the first centuries of the church. It had its climax in the 3rd century and 4th century, leading to the Council of Nicaea, where the Jewish people were being denounced as the enemy of the church. They were depicted as Christ killers and even as enemies of God. But this Christian anti-Semitism even had a very interesting German facet. The most important Christian that ever lived here in Germany was Martin Luther. He wrote a special book that was directed against the Jewish people, and he said something like the following.
In Section 11, Martin Luther advises Protestants to carry out the following actions: to burn down Jewish synagogues and schools, to refuse to let Jews own houses among Christians, to take away Jewish religious writings, to forbid rabbis from teaching, to offer no protection to Jews on highways, for all the Jews' silver and gold to be removed, to give young, strong Jews flail, axe, spade, and spindle, and let them earn their bread in the sweat of their brow.
So when Adolf Hitler started to persecute the Jewish people in Germany and some Christians started to challenge him about it, he very easily could quote Martin Luther, and he said, "What do you want? I'm just fulfilling what our German church father Martin Luther is commanding us to do." And therefore it doesn't surprise us that many people which participated here at the Wannsee conference, they were even trained theologians. Some of them have been the sons of pastors. They were all of them raised up with a Christian heritage. Each one of them had been a member of a Christian church, but there was no inner voice which convicted them to do otherwise. This means for us today that as anti-Semitism is on the rise again, and as Jews even here in Germany, out of all places, are afraid to wear a kippah again, that we as church need to stand up in solidarity and in friendship with the Jewish people, but also with the state of Israel. We should never forget that Jesus, our Savior, was Jewish. We should never forget that our Bible is a Jewish book. And we might wonder, how could the church forget that? But today we are called, with the state of Israel being in existence, to be in friendship and solidarity connected with the Jewish people in their homeland. Abraham received this incredible promise from God, where God says, "If you bless my seed, I will bless you also." And let's be a people of blessing, that is blessing his people, learn from the past, but change the future in our days today.
And that video was courtesy of the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, and a reminder that you can watch Jerusalem Dispatch ICJ on Monday the 7th of February at 7 p.m. Want to talk a bit more about this Wannsee conference because, I mean, it's extraordinary. So on Thursday the 20th of January, represented the 80th anniversary of the Wannsee conference that was scheduled at a dinner at the Berlin's Wannsee Lake. 15 senior Nazi officials came together on the 20th of January 1942. 15 had been invited for a conference by SS General Reinhard Heydrich, who was appointed by Adolf Hitler to prepare the final solution of the European Jewish question. The meeting would become known as the Wannsee Conference. The final solution was the code name for the systematic, deliberate, physical annihilation of the Jewish people. Heydrich convened the Wannsee Conference to inform and secure support from government ministers and other interested agencies related to the implementation of the final solution, and to disclose to the participants that Hitler himself had asked Heydrich with the coordinating with the operation. Now I'm going to read something else which is very, very shocking. Said that Heydrich spoke about the inclusion of 11 million Jews in the Nazi program for the final solution to the Jewish question. The minutes of the Wannsee Conference record that due to the war, the immigration plan has been placed with the deportation of the Jews to the east in according with the Führer's will. And as a result of the meeting, a network of extermination camps was established in which 1.7 million Jewish people were murdered from 1942 to 1943.
The attendees included Adolf Eichmann, and they did not actually deliberate at all on whether or not a plan should be undertaken. They assumed, yes, it should be undertaken. How do we implement this plan? How do we go about massacring these 11 million Jews? Sir Martin Gilbert wrote in his best-selling book, Never Again: The History of the Holocaust, Eichmann presented the gathering with a list of countries, setting out the number of Jews living in each, whom it was intended to deport to their deaths. Estonia was marked as being Judenfrei, Jew-free, as almost all Estonia's 1,000 Jews had already been murdered. And there were two figures for France, one for the area, including Paris, that had been occupied by Germany since June 1940. The other much larger figure was for unoccupied France, still under French rule, which included the Jews of Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. One copy of the Wannsee Conference minutes prepared by Eichmann survived World War II and was discovered accidentally in 1947. The term final solution only appears in it once. One notable quote from the minutes came from Dr. Josef Bühler, who said, "Jews should be removed from the domain of the general government as fast as possible because it is precisely here that the Jew constitutes a substantial danger as carrier of epidemics. Moreover, the majority of the 2.5 million Jews involved were not capable of work." Bühler then asked the meeting for only one favor, and that is, quote, "the Jewish question in this territory be resolved as rapidly as possible," end quote. When complete, the plan created an elimination list focusing on 11 million Jews in England, Ireland, Switzerland, Sweden, Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Denmark, Albania, Romania, Bulgaria, and France. Of the 15 Nazis who attended the conference, 4 were never prosecuted. 5 were tried and 3 were executed, including Eichmann. Now, Simon, we can look at this, and it's one of those things that it's shocking.
Okay.
You can ask why.
Let's put this in today's context, okay? You know, we are in January 2022. Could you imagine if a world leader or a country considered the most, one of the most civilized nations on the planet decide to have the Prime Minister there or their President there with their Ministers of State sitting around at a conference and saying, how do we annihilate 11 million people?
But Simon, people are still asking the Jewish question today. I saw a video of someone in this country sat with Piers Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn's brother, and we can't blame Jeremy for all that his brother says or does, but the guy specifically asked him in this podcast that reaches tens of thousands, and what do you think about the Jewish question? This is still being asked today.
And we know, for example, for example, the Islamic Republic of Iran want to destroy the Jewish people. We know that Hamas, Hezbollah, even the Palestinian Authority's ultimate game, the PLO's game, is to destroy the Jewish people. So this hasn't gone away. But I think it poses the big question that actually to have a conference with all your key ministers put in place to come out with the so-called final solution to kill or literally murder 11 million people is absolutely astonishing. And also the other aspect of this one is that if we look at the spiritual dynamics, we know that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. They are called under a covenant that God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so we know that the Nazi regime, the SS, Hitler himself, would actually use occultic practices in order to gain military advantage and military victory. So we're talking about probably the most demonic, evil, dark regime the world has ever known. And at its heart was Jew hatred. Yeah. And many of the military decisions made by the German military command were not based on military decisions. They were based on how many Jewish people can we find, hunt down and actually kill, which were distracted from Germany's war efforts.
So, Simon, a lot of the numbing of German society and others to this occurred through propaganda. We have a helpful email here from Jennifer. Been reflecting on the Holocaust today, and I think the big issue is propaganda. 77 years ago, it was cruel posters insulting Jews, and the seeds of Mein Kampf had done its damage. That was written in 1925, I believe. So slowly, this evil hatred against Jews was fed in the press until Hitler carried out his final solution. Now today, the BDS publications are the modern Mein Kampf, that group is way ahead of the Jews. The seed is germinated and has taken on a life of its own. The Jewish people and their supporters are playing catch up at trying to defend the Jews. Israel needs to win the young hearts and minds that the BDS have been working on for far too long. Worldwide publicity is key. My fear is when something major happens, like an Israeli strike against Iran, after all the kitten cornered by vicious dogs, what can they do but strike out? But when they do, prepare for the avalanche of blame and abuse Israel will get, I worry where it will lead. Okay, so here's something that I've noticed. You mentioned the posters, Jennifer. The posters are still going round, right? The posters are still there. We still have posters that continue to display people with Semitic features and that, long hands and everything, portraying Jews essentially in this evil, malevolent way.
No, absolutely. I mean, you only have to look at, go onto YouTube, look at Palestinian Media Watch, have a look what's on Palestinian media, and that they are actually indoctrinating their children with hatred. And it's very, very similar to that kind of Nazification that we saw in Germany in the 1930s. Very, very similar. The Jews are targeted, singled out, compared with rats and vermin, saying how the Jews carry pandemics and what have you, so therefore we need to get rid of them. And this absolute dehumanizing of the Jewish people, to the extent when they went into, say, Auschwitz-Birkenau, they were stripped of all their possessions. They were given horrible striped clothes to wear. Their hair was stripped off. They were just given a number, and that was to demonize them so much that they didn't even feel human anymore. Yeah. I mean, that is the extent of how sadistic the Nazis actually were. And it was a spirit. It's a spirit of hatred and anti-Semitism that falls upon people, can fall upon nations. And that's why we should be very concerned with anyone politically who holds horrific anti-Semitic views, because the enemy can use them and push them into powers of great power and influence.
We need to be aware also of, if we verse ourselves in some of the propaganda, when we see publications that use this anti-Semitic imagery. There are campaign groups, I know, that always have a go at George Soros or someone like that, and they often use imagery, propaganda that's very, very Nazi-esque. I remember receiving an email that I was quite shocked at by a group that I kind of have some support for, and it had a Nazi-esque propaganda like poster. I immediately wrote my friend who worked there and said, what is this? They reviewed it. It was someone in one of their European offices who thought this would be a good idea to. It was a horror show. Thankfully, they removed it and recanted it. But there are, Simon, Christian groups that to this day will not speak very clearly on this issue. They won't condemn anti-Semitism. They won't acknowledge the rampant anti-Semitism that can occur in various fringe groups of Christendom. It's fairly people given platforms, Stephen Sizer, individuals like that who have openly spoken in anti-Semitic ways, but they still are given platforms by gospel partnerships, by church society, by other groups.
So what did the vast majority of the evangelical churches do in Germany during the reign of the Nazis? They followed suit.
Yeah.
Very few of them. I mean, you did have Bonhoeffer, who showed incredible bravery and courage in standing up to the Nazi regime for seeing evil for what it was. But there are accounts of German Christians singing praise music and as the Nazi death trains carrying Jews were going to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And when they heard the cries, they would sing louder.
I have little confidence, Simon, that it would be any different today, even in this country. I think there might be a handful who say, we need to pray, or the government, they're just going to be replacing or relocating. It's not a big deal. It's for, I was doing some reading earlier, quickly read this quote. People say, well, why? How is it that so many Jews were deceived and were massacred? Baba Yar, 33,000 Jewish people were murdered in one particular event beginning on 29th of September of 1941. That's in in Ukraine. And a survivor of this, a young girl, basically, she said, you know, we got this message on Monday, September 29th. You're to appear by 7 a.m. with your possessions, money, documents, valuables, and warm clothing at this particular street next to the Jewish cemetery. Failure to appear is punishable by death. All the Jews decided to go. Maestrenko said, of the 29 known to have survived, all the Jews decided to go there because they thought that they would be evacuated by train, as the railway station was nearby. Nobody could possibly assume there would be a mass execution. 33,000 in the space of a couple of days, Simon. I have no question that there would be Christians today saying, oh, well, you need to just go and we'll see what happens.
Or the other thing is, another question as well, what happened if you're actually hiding some Jewish people? You know, and then you have to say, you know, when the SS knock on the door, we've heard you have, you know, some Jewish people that are hiding in your home. You know, and that's when you have to
tell the truth, Simon. Do we?
Not on this occasion.
Do we? Yeah.
No, because it's a righteous thing to do, is to protect the innocent. Also, sadly, we don't have time. We're going to run out of programme, but there's an interesting debate whether the Allied forces could have bombed Auschwitz-Birkenau in the summer of 1944, and the evidence suggests that it is. I'm just going to read an extract of this one. It says, in their first meeting in 1979, President Jimmy Carter handled Elie Wiesel, a noted author and survivor of Auschwitz, who was then the chairman of the President's Commission on the Holocaust, a copy of the soon-to-be-released aerial photos of the extermination camps at Auschwitz-Birkenau, taken by American intelligence forces during the Second World War. And there is a big debate saying that we had American B-52 bombers fly so close and carried out bombing raids so close to Auschwitz-Birkenau in the summer of 1944. American P-45 fighter jets carrying them could have easily bombed the railway tracks, could have easily bombed some of the manufacturing factories they had in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And so this opens up a big moral debate, is why didn't Roosevelt do so?
Well, there were Jewish organizations that were pleading with the Roosevelt administration, pleading that they would bomb the gas chambers and crematoria in Auschwitz. And it's one of those things, Simon, there were mistakes that were made. Definitely, we have to remember that Roosevelt was extremely hesitant to involve the United States in the European front of the Second World War at all. We wouldn't have become involved in World War II at all, I don't think, were it not for what happened at Pearl Harbor and some political necessities.
So the big question is, within a minute, what are the lessons that we need to learn from the Holocaust?
We need to take extra care as to the creeping propaganda that we see all around us that is very much anti-Jew, and that's filled with Jew hatred. We need to call it out wherever we see Jew hatred, whether that's in schools, whether it's in publication, media, certainly if it's in our churches. We need to recognize that that God still has a special promise in place for his people, the Jewish people.
Absolutely. Regan, it's great to do a programme on this very depressing but such an important topic. And I just want to thank you for watching this programme at home. Tomorrow is the International Holocaust Memorial Day, and this is a message that we need to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. We can't tolerate Jew hatred, after all, because the Jewish people are beloved by God. They are his people. Israel is his land, and it's imperative as Christians that we don't remain silent in face of the rising Jew hatred. We don't make the same mistake the generation did in the 1920s and 30s by not standing by the Jewish people as Hitler took power and started to implement the final solution. So we thank you so much for the Jewish people, and we thank you so much for watching Behind the Headlines.